What was God's purpose for the wise men coming to see Jesus in Bethlehem after he was born? Welcome to the channel. I'm Kerry, and I enjoy studying the Bible to learn truth and to find things that will encourage you as you walk through this thing we call life. In this video, we're going to talk about the wise men and why God sent them. Also, we'll answer some other questions. Were there three kings that came to Bethlehem, like the song says? Did they show up at the stable and see Jesus in the manger, like we always pictured? Most important thing we're going to look at is the impact they had on Jesus, on Jerusalem, and the people in the area surrounding there. So let's dive into the scripture and see what we can find. It's going to be Matthew chapter 2. Now the wise men were called here for a purpose. This was ordained by God centuries before. And we're going to see how God's providence works as we go through this. One of the things we're going to look at is they came to see a prophecy fulfilled. They started a chain of events that were necessary to see other prophecies fulfilled. And they financed Joseph and Mary's trip with Jesus to Egypt. So Matthew chapter 2, verse 1 says, "Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east, and we have come to worship him." So they've traveled, and we don't know how far they've traveled, but they've traveled from the east to Jerusalem, looking for this king who has been born. He's already been born. Now, we don't know if the star, they followed the star all the way to Jerusalem. We'll look at that here in a minute, a little bit more. But they knew that this was a Jewish king. So if you want to know about American history, you go to Washington, Library of Congress, for instance. You want to know about the French, you go to Paris. If you want to know about the Jewish world, you go to Jerusalem. That's the hub. That's the center of the Jewish life. Now, somewhere, these wise men had heard this prophecy of a king being born and a star that would represent him somewhere. Now, tradition says these men were astronomers, so anything in the sky that was different, they would have noticed when it got their attention. Well, the star that appeared was extraordinary. It was something to be seen, and they paid attention to it. And somewhere along the line, between the time they saw it, they decided to go and see this king, because this is a huge deal, this prophecy. Now, years before, God is preparing them for this trip. He has given them wisdom and knowledge in stars and in prophecy. Because when they saw this star, somewhere along the line, it clicked that this is a prophecy about this King of the Jews that's coming. Now, he also provided them with wealth to make this trip. You know, we don't know how long it took them. It might have took them 4 months. It might have took them a year and a half. We don't know. It depends on how far they traveled. But God also provided them to be able to bring the gifts that they gave to Jesus. We'll talk about them more in just a minute. Now, they started a chain of events that were necessary to fulfill other prophecies. There's 5 prophecies in chapter 2 alone, and they had a hand in seeing 3 of them fulfilled. Now, verse 3 says, "When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all of Jerusalem with him." Now, Herod, as king, felt threatened. If there's a new king coming in, this king has been born, that threatens Herod and his legacy. You know, his future, his kids' future. Big problem. You know, you're going to be kicked out. All of Jerusalem was troubled because, they had heard about the Messiah coming for 1,000 years, but they hadn't heard that he'd been born. And now these guys show up and say, he has been born, where is he at? Well, they didn't know. And that bothered them because they should have known. The wise men, the priests, the Pharisees, the scribes, you'd think they would have known. And you wonder, did they not see the star? Or maybe it didn't click with them that this was prophecy. Maybe they didn't see the star. We don't know. What we do know is this started Herod plotting to kill Jesus, which is necessary for some of the prophecies to come through. So verse 4 says, and when he had gathered all the chief priests and scribes and the people together, he inquired of them where Christ was to be born. So they told him, in Bethlehem of Judea, for thus is written by the prophet, but you, Jerusalem, in the land of Judah, are not the least among the rulers of Judah, for out of you shall come a ruler who shall shepherd my people Israel. So Herod calls in all the wise men, scribes. Where's this going to take place at? Where's it supposed to take place at? They tell him Bethlehem. Now, for some reason, the wise men didn't know it was Bethlehem because they came to Jerusalem first. But that was because they had to talk to Herod, and Herod had to get triggered and plot to kill Jesus. Now, this prophecy we just read about of being born in Bethlehem is another deal where God's providence comes in. Now, Mary's pregnant, and they live, according to Luke's gospel, Joseph lives in Nazareth. So for Jesus to be born in Bethlehem, they're going to have to travel. They've got no reason to travel. Joseph's got a business there. He's a carpenter. They're settled into the house, whatever. But to get Jesus born in Bethlehem, something has to make him go. Enter Caesar Augustus. He decides, randomly, that he's going to have everyone taxed. So you have to go back to your family's hometown to register for this tax. Therefore, Joseph has to take Mary and go to Bethlehem to get registered. Now, it was just coincidence, I'm sure. God's timing's perfect. This decree from Caesar comes in. Mary's pregnant. Just the right time for them to travel from Nazareth to get to Bethlehem, not too soon. So they register and leave before she has the baby. Not too late. She doesn't have the baby before they get there. It's just the right time. So the decree comes in. Joseph has to move, take him and Mary and go to Bethlehem. They get there. That's when Luke's story kicks in and says that there was no room in the inn. They went up in a stable, and Jesus was born in Bethlehem. So God had to use Caesar to get Joseph to Bethlehem so this prophecy would be fulfilled. Now, verse 7 says, then Herod, when he had secretly called the wise men, determined from them what time the star appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem and said, go and search carefully for the young child, and when you have found him, bring back word to me that I may come and worship him also. Now, again, the wise men didn't know they needed to go to Bethlehem. But they meet secretly, or Herod meets secretly with the wise men because he wants to know the location of where Jesus is so he can have him killed. Now, he wants to do this quietly. He doesn't want to bring attention to Jesus. If he is the coming king, he doesn't want to be known for that. And what he's thinking is, I'll send these wise men down there. They'll find him. They'll come back and tell me privately. They'll meet with me privately. And I will send an assassin down there, and I'll take out Jesus. And everybody will think it was just a random murder. I won't be linked to this. Because if Herod could have went with the wise men to Bethlehem, but that would have been a huge deal. Anytime the king traveled, everybody knew about it. So he goes down with the wise men, sees Jesus, and now he's linked to Jesus. And if something happens to Jesus as the coming king, Herod's going to catch it, because he caused all this. So therefore, the secret meeting he had with the wise men was to plan all this, to plot this. Now, verse 9 says, when they had heard the king, they departed, and behold, the star which they had seen in the east went before them, till it came and stood over where the young child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceedingly great joy. Now, I'm not going to go into the star too much, but now this is my opinion. It sounds like they saw the star and they started traveling, but it sounded like the star disappeared somewhere. But now, as they leave Jerusalem to head to Bethlehem, the star reappears. And that's one reason they says they rejoice exceedingly great, had a great joy, because the star reappeared. And this wasn't a comet, this wasn't a meteor, this was a phenomenon that has never been seen before. Because it moved, it led them from Jerusalem to Bethlehem, and then it stopped over the house where Jesus was living. Now, there again, don't know. Was it, really low in the sky, only house in 10 miles? I don't know. Was it like a spotlight and it shone right on that house, so there was no doubt that this was where it was at? That'd be more my opinion. I don't know. The Bible doesn't say. It makes you wonder. But they were really happy, not only because of the star, but because they were so close to seeing the king that they had come to see. So they was going to worship. So this was huge for them. And verse 11 says, and when they had come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented gifts to him, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. All right, now these verses show that the wise men were not at the stable when Jesus was born that night in a manger. They weren't there. He's in a house. He's a young child. So they weren't there. Tradition says that there was 3 wise men or 3 kings. We don't know. They say that because they brought 3 gifts. Could be. Don't know. The verses that we'll read here in a minute show that Jesus was right at 2 years old, or just a little bit under 2 years old, when they showed up. Now, the gifts they bring. When you go and visit a king, if you're rich and you go visit a king, you brought large, lavish gifts. That's just the way it was all through the Old Testament. When you went to see a king, if you were rich or a king yourself, you brought extravagant gifts. The gold is very important. Gold is a universal currency. It can be used anywhere. It still is today. Back then, all the nations around Israel had their own money. Egypt had money. Romans had their money. Different ones had their own currency. But gold could be used anywhere. Anywhere on earth at that time, if you had gold, you had money. Frankincense, we don't know a lot about why frankincense and myrrh were provided. Frankincense was used as a trading material. It was used in perfumes. It was used in religious ceremonies, which a lot of the Jews used it in sacrifice ceremonies. It was also a medicine. Myrrh was used in burials. It was used in perfumes, but it was also a medicine. And the tradition says they brought it because of it was for burial. I don't know about that because Jesus didn't die for another 30 years. So is he going to pack around the myrrh until then? I don't think so. It had something else, some other value that we don't know about. Now, verse 12 says, then being divinely warned in a dream that they should not return to Herod, they departed for their own country another way. And we don't know how long they stayed there. It doesn't sound like they stayed very long. It sounded like they showed up, and maybe that night they were warned not to go back to see Herod and to get out of there and go. Now, when they woke up, the Bible doesn't say if all of them had this dream, if a couple of them had it, but they agreed they needed to leave and go a different way and get out of there. Now, the wise men's job is done at this point. We don't hear from them again. They pack up and they leave, and we don't know if they know the impact that they had with their coming to Jerusalem and to Bethlehem. We don't know if they know what they did. What we do know is they were obedient and they fulfilled a prophecy or made other prophecies possible. And we see God's providence in all this, working with them, providing for them, and getting them there so they could stir up Herod. And so Jesus would have this gold to travel with. You wonder how many times we've done something. We've been friends with somebody for a reason or for a season that God had planned, and we never saw the impact of that. We don't know how that worked out. This is why being obedient is so important. And just trust in God. When the Holy Spirit tells you to go do something or go somewhere to help someone, even if it's a stranger, there's a reason for that. We may be God's answer to that person's prayer. We don't know. We don't know what a kind word or a small action will do. A lot of times it's the little things that is a major thing to someone else. You're kind to a server. You're kind to the checkout lady at the grocery store who's having a bad day. You're patient with them. Little things. Just a phone call to encourage one of your friends. Just out of the blue, you call them and just want to check on you, see how you're doing. You don't know they're having a terrible day and they needed somebody or wanted somebody to listen to them. Sometimes it's just simple as listening to somebody. You run into somebody at the grocery store, at the gas station, you've never seen them before, and they get to talking to you. Well, you're in a hurry, you're wanting to go, but you get that little tug, just listen. Just sit there and listen. They need somebody to talk to. You listen to them, and that affects them. That somebody would take time out of their day to listen to them and hear them. That's a big deal. Think about it in your life. How many times something like that's happened to you? You're driving down the road, you have a flat tire. Somebody stops and helps you. They didn't have to. They could have kept right on traveling, but it was a big deal to you. It wasn't nothing to them. I've stopped and helped people. No big deal. I can change the tire real quick. But to them, it was a huge deal. One lady and her husband was on the way to the doctor, had a flat, no way of fixing it. I just happened upon them. I stopped, helped them, got them back on the road. No big deal to me, huge deal to them because they were two old people. They couldn't do it themselves. They didn't have phone service, so they couldn't call anybody. They didn't know what they was going to do. Well, I just happened along. God had me drive that road that day to run into them, to help them. And I stopped. I didn't have to stop, but I did. And that little action had an impact on them because they told me later, they told my wife later, they knew my wife, that was a big deal for them, that I would stop and help them that day. So you never know what your small action will do for someone else. Now, verse 13 says, "Now when they had departed, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, Arise, take the young child and his mother, flee to Egypt, and stay there until I bring you word, for Herod will seek the young child to destroy him." Verse 14 says, "Then he arose, took the young child and his mother by night, and departed for Egypt, and was there until the death of Herod, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the Lord through the prophet, saying, Out of Egypt I will call my son." So again, we've got a prophecy here. Out of Egypt I will call my son. Before that can be fulfilled, Jesus has to be in Egypt. Well, Joseph just had a baby. He's in Bethlehem. He's not going to Egypt for no reason. That's not where they go. He's a Jew. He stays around Israel. But God needed him to go to Egypt. So the way to do that was to threaten the life of his son. So in this dream, he's told, arise, and he says, flee to Egypt, not go to Egypt, flee to Egypt. Flee means something's after you, something's chasing you, something's out to get you. And so it was very, very important that Joseph move now. Goes back to another thing about providence. God chose Joseph to raise Jesus, partly for this reason. You study out Joseph's life. Joseph was very obedient. Joseph listened When he had a dream, he listened and he did what he was told. He didn't question, he did it. And just like this, he's told to flee. So he gets up in the middle of the night, packs up Mary and Jesus, and heads off to Egypt. He doesn't wait 2 days. He doesn't discuss it with Mary. He doesn't, pray about it and think about it and wonder about it and wait. He moved, because lives were dependent upon it. That's why God put Joseph there and not someone else who might have questioned this dream. Excuse me. Now Herod's plotting to kill Jesus. The wise men have left. Now, Bethlehem is like 6 miles from Jerusalem, ballpark. So this is why it's so important that they go now and go quickly. Because we'll read here in just a second, when Herod finds out that the wise men didn't come back and talk to him, he loses his temper. Now, one of the big things about Joseph, they left in the middle of the night. And you didn't do that back then. You didn't travel at night. Between bandits, between wild animals, you just didn't travel at night. But he trusted God to take care of him because God said, go, and then I'll bring you back. So he listened to that and said, okay, if God's going to send me down and bring me back, then he's going to take care of me along the way. And he's also going to provide for me. So the gold that he had just gotten the night or two before, whenever it was, the wise men showed up, is now going to pay for this trip to Egypt. Now, they're there somewhere around 2 years. From the time they leave till the time Herod dies is somewhere around 2 years. So they went to Egypt for around 2 years. Now this trip we don't know how long it took. Depends on where they went in Egypt. But from Jerusalem to Egypt is a long trip. So it could have took 2 months or more. Traveling with a woman and a young child, it may have took more than that. But this gold provided them the ability to go to Egypt and to stay there for 2 years. I don't know if they paid rent. Joseph was a carpenter. He may have worked. But this gold helped to meet their needs while they were down there and on their trip back. They still had to pay for the trip back. So there again, the wise men don't know about this. They've left. They didn't have any idea what this gold was going to be used for. But they were obedient to God, and when they showed up, they did what God told them. They left, but their obedience is still impacting Jesus and his family. So now verse 16 says, Then Herod, when he saw that he had been deceived by the wise men, was exceedingly angry. And he sent forth and put to death all the male children who were in Bethlehem and all of its districts, from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he had determined from the wise men. Then was fulfilled what was spoken by Jeremiah the prophet, saying, A voice was heard in Ramah, lamentations, weeping, and great mourning. Rachel weeping for her children, refusing to be comforted because they were no more. Now these wise men, when they showed up, they weren't a normal caravan. They were seeking the king. That was their main reason for being there. So everybody heard about this. We read earlier, all of Jerusalem was upset about this, troubled about it. So there was a lot of curious people. There was a lot of nosy people. I'm sure Herod had spies out. So they kept track of the wise men. And when they left and didn't go back to see Herod, the word got back to him pretty quick. This was why it was so important for Joseph to move really quick. Because like I said, 6 miles, a troop can cover that in a very short amount of time, just a couple hours or less. They can be there. So Joseph had to get out. Now, they didn't see Joseph leave because Joseph left after dark. So now, verse 19, Now Herod was dead. Behold, the angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt, saying, Arise, take the young child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel, for those who sought the young child's life are dead. Then he arose, took the young child and his mother, and came into the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning over Judah instead of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. And being warned by God in a dream, he turned aside to the region of Galilee, and he came and dwelt in the city of Nazareth, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the prophet, he should be called a Nazarene. So we've got basically 5 prophecies in this chapter, 3 of which resulted because of the wise men's obedience and their trip to Jerusalem and then on to Bethlehem and then leaving like they were warned in the dream. They may never know what they did, but they were a part of something that God had been planning for centuries and centuries. With these prophecies had to be fulfilled because God put them out from his prophets, and to honor them, these prophecies had to be fulfilled. So it makes me wonder, what has God used me for? Or what will God use me for that I may never know of, that I'm a part of his master plan? Like I said, obedience is so important. It doesn't matter if we understand it or not. It doesn't matter if we want to do it or not. God has a bigger plan and needs you in that. And if he needs you to do it, he will provide for you. I've seen times where you're in a hurry. You got a lot of stuff to do today, and you get delayed because someone wants to talk. Well, you stop and you listen and you minister to them. Then you go on about your day and you get everything done ahead of time, quicker than you thought you would. That's God blessing you for being obedient. Listen to the Holy Spirit and move when he tells you to move. And I've got a quick story on that. The other day, I was needing to mail some stuff. Well, I was going to wait and go after lunch. But something said, no, go right now. So I listened. I got up, I jumped in the car, I took off, and as I'm coming into town, I'm coming around a corner, and this dog runs off out of the yard, across the ditch, and there's a lady walking down the highway. And this dog attacks this lady right in front of me. I see the dog coming. So I floor the car, and I run up there, and I lay on the horn, and the dog runs off. Lady's getting up. Anyway, if I hadn't have listened, what would that have turned out to be? Nobody else was around. I come up there, stop the dog from attacking her. It could have been really bad if I hadn't listened and went then, because I wasn't going to. I was going to wait till after lunch, and that was going to be another hour and a half or 2 hours. But I was impressed to go now, and I went. Little things, didn't know the woman, never seen her again. But what did I save her from? And at a time of need, she needed somebody. God needed somebody there to stop that attack. Small thing, but by being obedient, it changed her life. She wasn't all chewed up like she could have been because the dog was wanting to eat her. So sometimes it's the little things that make a big difference. Like I said, just giving a bigger tip to your server than you normally would. Maybe she's having a bad day. You don't know nothing about it. The Lord presses on your heart. Bump it up. Give her something more. It's a blessing to them. It's not about if you know about it or not. It's about you being obedient. So, think about that as you go through your day. How many times has God used you, the friend for a reason, friend for a season? You may not be friends with them the rest of your life. It may just be for a short time. You may just run into a stranger for, a few minutes at the gas station. But something you do, pay for a lady's groceries at the grocery store. Not a big thing, but it's a big thing for them. Maybe they've been praying, Lord, I'm out of groceries here. I've been there, done that. We had some food in the house, but not a lot. We prayed about it. Not long after, somebody showed up with a bag of groceries. That's God working. To them, it was no big deal. This little old bag of groceries didn't cost them much at all. To us, it's a huge deal because God answered our prayer and provided for our needs. So obedience is huge. These wise men were obedient and made a huge impact on Jesus and fulfilled prophecies that had to be fulfilled. Now, are you going to have something that dramatic? I don't know. But if God asks you to do it, if it takes 5 minutes or if it takes 2 years, if you trust him, then God will get glory out of it and you will be blessed for doing it. So I hope you found something in this study about the wise men interesting, learned something you didn't know about them, something about God's providence, or just about how your being obedient can change someone's life. You might be the answer to someone's prayer. God may use you for that. If you enjoyed the video, if you got anything out of it, like and share if you would. Maybe your friends get something out of it. Subscribe if you want to, and check out some of the other videos. Thank you for spending time with me today in God's Word. Until next time, the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. And God bless.